Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be a kind of instructional video on how to clean your gas blowback rifle. This is a rifle that actually I haven't used for a little bit, but I actually don't think I cleaned it after I last used it, which is not good. You should regularly clean your gas blowback rifles. If you're playing outdoors with them, especially if you play in a place where I play, which is in Southern California, where it gets dusty, it's hot. A lot of that dirt will find its way into your replica. It's not necessarily like dropping your replica in the mud in the UK after it's been raining, but it is probably in a way, you know, worse that it can go undetected for a while and then you can end up like, you know, with bits breaking, like the actual thing not working when you're actually out in the game. So I generally will clean this every single time that I have gone out to play with it. I'm actually going to be doing my Toxicant XM5 after this, so I'll do another video on that. I thought, you know what, I just used that, so I was going to clean this. But the amount of people that have a Toxicant XM5 is very low. So the value to you guys in terms of just showing what I do to clean my gas blowback is probably not as high. So what I have with me today is I have some of these Q-tips, these long ones. These, I'll put links below to like what these are. But basically if you go on Amazon and search like Q-tips or like swabs for cotton swab and gun cleaning patches is what it's called on this. You should be able to buy these pretty easily. They are very cheap and you can get versions which these are where it just is supposed to not drop lint. So that fluff that comes off them, you don't really want that inside your replica. So it's kind of like a good version to get, which is without that. Other ones I've got here is some silicone oil. I actually did a video of this on my gas blowback pistol on my Glock 45. So if you want to see how this works with a pistol, go and check that video out. And I only use the silicone oil on this. And then I have this, which is my Super Lube silicone lubricating grease, which is a lot heavier, more viscous material. And I'm going to use that on this because I actually got recommended that and it seems to work really well. Like, I haven't used it on the pistol. I've only used this on my gas blowback rifles, but from where I have used it, not as much in the cleaning process, but afterwards where I've just put some grease into certain places, that's worked pretty well for me. And then finally, I also have with me a punch set. So this again is something that I think most people should just have in their house. If you have airsoft guns or specifically gas blowbacks, but quite a few different little punches and a little rubber hammer and a metal side so I can kind of knock stuff out. This really is just going to be for taking the pins out of the actual X. This is my Tokyo Marui Mk18 that I'm going to be doing today. So that's going to be what that's for. So first of all, guys, what we're going to do is just break this thing down. So we're going to just take this apart. I don't think I'm going to need the punch for this one specifically. I will for the XM5. What I will do a lot of the time is put like an O-ring into this little forward pin area so that it keeps the upper and the lower closer together. That I would say you will generally want to replace every so often. And so that's something you want to look at. What I've actually done for this one specifically is I have cut down a VFC AccuEdge that came with this, with one of the, I think it actually came with the MCX. No, the MPXK. So I've cut that down and that little rubber piece in there I've put there just so that it basically will sit there and then just keep the upper and the lower. It kind of sits underneath where that rear pinhole is, keeps the upper and the lower a lot more solid together. So that's something I've got in there, but it's not necessarily something you need. So what we're going to start with, guys, is I've got the upper and the lower separate. I'll take out the actual weight here. I'm going to push this down so that we have that trigger box out the way. I'm going to take the spring out. I'm going to take my buffer spring and buffer tube out of here. This actually needs to be punched back in because this is caught on here. So that's a good thing I've just discovered, is that this little piece right here, this little pin has started to come out, which has pinned the spring in place. So I'm going to knock that back in. I'm going to do that so you guys can see. I'm just going to knock that back in, which is going to release. Just make sure that's lined up. which is going to release this spring. And that means that I'm actually going to have this not break as quickly, because that would have affected the recoil on this. I'm going to take this spring off first. So it's just going to be easier to do it a little bit more. Okay, so those little roll pins, these ones here, which are just like a kind of rolled piece of metal, those can come out. And so what I've had to do there is just place that back in place. And it's good, actually, now that I open this up to clean it, to actually discover that. Because it looked like the spring had actually kind of caught on it and started kind of getting wound up. So we've got the lower there, which has had the buffer and the buffer spring removed. I'm not going to take out the trigger box, but you should do that every so often. And we have the upper here. And so what we're going to do is remove the charging handle and the bolt, which is there, and the charging handle there. And then we have this upper in place there, so that should be pretty good. I'm not going to remove any of the attachments I have on here, the foregrip, the switch, the PEC unit, the Hydra mount, or the EOTech, or the flashlight, but I will kind of try and clean around those a little bit. What I always start with when I'm doing this is the swabs. I like to just kind of get a few of these. We'll put these down here so I've got them. We're not going to touch the lube and the silicone for a bit, but what I am going to do is basically just try and wipe down everything that could have dirt on it. What you can do for the exterior is actually get some alcohol wipes, and that can work quite well. But as you can see here already, just that trigger box, I'll do the lower first just so that we have that done, and then I'll move on and I'll do the other parts afterwards. But you can see already, there is a huge amount of dirt that just builds up. Every time that this thing is recoiling, there is going to be air that is going inside and outside. It's going to be sucking air through. Generally, what I will try and do as well is if you run green gas in your replica, a lot of the time that will have silicone in it. So it kind of supposedly self-lubes itself as you're using it. And that can be kind of good because obviously you're kind of keeping that lubrication in place and it's going to keep those parts moving. But generally I've found, and the opinions that I've found from other people, is there's just too much lubricant that it kind of puts in there. If you look inside the buffer tube there's a ton of dirt. It can just put too much lubricant and it kind of sprays it everywhere. So you can get this situation where it's just putting it all over the hop rubber. It's kind of affecting your accuracy. It's putting it places that you just don't really want it, in your inner barrel. Look at that inside. So generally just kind of don't use that and use green gas, which doesn't have silicone. I use one by Swiss Arms, which basically is silicone free. However, if you are using that, what you are going to have to do is actually physically clean and lube, or sorry, not clean. You're actually going to have to put lubricant in the replica because otherwise, it's not getting anything put in there. And as the bolt is moving, much more like a kind of real firearm, you want to make sure that the pieces are moving and they're all in a good space. Now, for hard to reach places, we have these, which are effectively the Q-tips that you would use in your ear, but just a lot longer in terms of the length of them. And what I'm going to do is in this stock tube, I can't really reach the whole way down. I could remove the stock tube really and then clean everything, but you can see there just that ring of dirt that is just coming off there. And it doesn't matter really as much when it's the buffer and the spring in the rear that's doing it, because it's not going to as much get into the moving parts and affect the performance, but it's definitely something you need to clean. You don't just want to leave it forever because that will start to go into other places, like into your trigger box, and that's going to affect your trigger pull. So this is really dirty. So we'll use that one. We'll do another one. And we'll just try and clean this up as much as we can. I've had this replica for a while now, for a couple of years, and it was probably my go-to until recently, where I'm using that Toxicant XM5 a lot more. So it's definitely seen a lot of wear and tear, and it's been out and about a lot. So I've cleaned it a few times, but I actually kind of was thinking about it. I was like, I think last time I used it, I was indoors. And if I'm indoors generally, obviously the kind of dust situation isn't as big of a deal. So I don't necessarily get home and the next day I'm like, right, I need to clean that, which I should do. I mean, look at that. That is so dirty. So I obviously haven't cleaned this enough. I'm just going to wipe around this edge with this. Sorry if this video is kind of long, guys, because obviously I'm trying to demonstrate how I'm doing this, and I don't really want to do like a half-assed job. And it might just be like a kind of, not ASMR video, but like therapeutic for some of you guys to see someone clean the replica. But really the basics are very simple, which is that you're going to effectively clean and get the dirt off everything that you can. Continue to wipe it. You'll like wipe it the first time and you'll get some dirt coming off, and then wipe it again and there'll be more dirt, and then keep wiping this thing until you literally have it clean. Like more dirt is not coming off at that point. And then you know that you've got all of that off. However, that's not the only thing you need to do, because a clean surface is great, but metal on metal, when you've got moving parts, is not going to be good for your replica. You're going to get scratching. You're not going to get the like parts functioning properly. And so what you need on top of that is lubricant. And you don't want to lube over a dirty surface because you're just trapping dirt in. You want to lube something that's clean. So what I would do, and what you should do, is basically go through as if you were cleaning your teeth, scrub and rub everything. And if you're, you know, like if it's like you've played one game and you just need to do a quick clean, great, but you probably should do like a regular checkup, like going to the dentist. Maybe not if you're in the UK, but if you're in the US, people go to the dentist regularly, and about every 6 months you have like a dental clean where you go in there, and even if you haven't got any cavities or you haven't got any like major issues, they'll just do kind of like a deep clean, like scrub of your teeth, get any of the like excess plaque off, tell you should be flossing, which they tell me every single time. It's like, have you been flossing? And I'm generally pretty honest with them. And I just say, no, I haven't been very good at flossing. I just kind of, it takes too long. But it's the same kind of concept with this. However, you don't really need to lubricate your mouth because you have saliva. Like, this thing does not generate its own lubricant because it's a piece of metal. And so you need to be doing this as much as you can. So what I'm doing now, guys, is this trigger box, which is this area here. You can see that there's all these different like little holes and parts in here. You can't really get the swab in, but I can kind of stick this into different areas, and I can try and get all of the dirt out of here that's possible. What I also want to do is release the trigger, because that's going to bring the hammer up, and that's going to allow me, again, just to get into a little bit deeper spots. What you will do occasionally, or you will have, is if you have a BB that shatters inside the replica, which does happen, you know, it doesn't feed fully, gets stuck somewhere. Sometimes some of the fragments will get down in here, and I've had that before, especially when I'm running an HPA adapter. So just bear in mind that, yes, you don't necessarily have to take apart the trigger box very often, but sometimes that will need to happen. You'll get dirt build up, and you may get little fragments of BBs that just end up getting stuck down into it. Next, I'm going to basically use my bad lever here to just raise up this mag release, sorry, the bolt release. We'll clean around there. And don't be afraid just to use a ton of these. Like, yes, it feels kind of wasteful that you're using so many swabs, but they are cheap. I'm sure they're not that bad for the environment, being like cotton and wood. You can probably get plastic versions, but if you're very eco-minded, which being an airsoft is quite hard, you may use like bio BBs, which would be good, but generally we are firing plastic all over an area and putting plastic in everything. So you may not be in that same vein. So I'm also going to go around this mag release. Just make sure I've got all of that done. And I'm going to push the mag release in and similarly just kind of wipe around the outside of this piece. My little bad lever, I'm going to try and get around the bolt release here. And then the other one that I'm going to do, and I'm going to make this a clean one, is just the base of the trigger here, where the trigger is coming into the lower. That's definitely a place where you'll get dirt that just kind of like accumulates, because obviously that trigger is moving backwards and forwards. You've got your gloves sitting on it. You know, you may have put your gloves in some dirt. And so I would definitely go around there, and that one for sure is pretty dirty. Also just kind of like around the trigger guard. Again, this is more an area where you could kind of get some like alcohol wipes, and the exterior is going to be, you know, it's a lot more hard wearing. It's a lot less bad if you get alcohol in there. I wouldn't necessarily use alcohol in the interior. But if you are in that zone of the back, then it shouldn't, you know, sorry, on the outside, it shouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to rub this pin. Then I'm going to get a couple of cotton swabs, and a good little area to clean is actually inside the mag well. You can see there already. It's just a lot of me showing the camera the dirt that I'm finding inside my replica. And this, to be honest, is quite embarrassing because I did not realize this thing was this dirty. But yeah, I mean, it's something, and I said this in the gas blowback pistol video, but it's something that you can kind of, you know, end of the day, you get back from work. Normally, if I've just played a game and it's on the weekend, I'm pretty tired and I don't necessarily want to get my replicas out and start cleaning. But the next day, you may get it, you know, you're sitting in front of the TV in the evening and you want to be careful you're not, you know, putting grease and dirt all over your sofa. But it's a great time just to be potentially, you know, cleaning, watching TV. And as I said, it is kind of like therapeutic in a lot of ways. Okay, so that little area we have done now. Let me just see if there's anything else that I want to make sure that we've done, but I think we're pretty good on that. I'll put this little piece just back in there, so we've got it. And that is the lower good for now. Then what I'm going to do is I'll do these parts. So again, I'm going to get the swab. I'm going to put this around the charging handle and just try and get some of this dirt off the charging handle. Again, this is like, it's not reciprocating necessarily because it's not moving backwards and forwards with the bolt, but you are charging it with your hand and it has got access into that bolt. I've got this little Geisley, I think this is a repro, this isn't a real one. Charging handle. I want to kind of make sure we've got areas in here, like this has got a spring mechanism, obviously, to kind of like put that. So we want to, as much as we can, clean out the areas where the spring is, because dirt's going to get in the way of that spring and affect it. You may not have that on your charging handle. You could have different versions of it. So it's going to depend, you know, on the specific kind of charging handle you have, where you're actually going to be cleaning. But this one's a pretty easy one, or it should be pretty easy. There's not like a lot of different like holes and crevices you need to get into. So that's good. We'll put that to one side. Right, now the spring and the bolt. I'm going to, sorry, in the buffer. I'm going to do the buffer first and get as much of this grime off here as I can. This will be quite greasy generally because you will lube this. So you can get pretty messy hands with this. And this one has got like a spring internally in it. So I want to like compress that, make sure it's pulled out. Make sure we've got much of this like just black grime off here. I'll just put this into this little gap here, this gap here, go around the pin, which I just had to put back in. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of these roll pins generally. And actually what's bad with this is like when it's in this buffer's going back and forward each time you're pulling the trigger. Or, you know, when you're pulling the trigger when it's got a gas mag in it and it's reciprocating, it's basically just allowing that bolt to kind of push back on here. So it is going to have a lot of like vibration in it. So the fact that it's got roll pins and those are going to get knocked out is not great. So that's something I should check on pretty regularly. But that now looks grey, but that's in pretty good spot. Next, I'm going to do the spring, and you may want like something like a bigger rag for this. I don't have one here, so I'm just going to use these swabs. But this is, again, can get very, very dirty, and you probably want to like put, like you can see the lines there on my hand of just holding it. You probably want to put quite a lot of just like material across the spring. You know, you want to make sure it's, I think actually one quite good way is just to like revolve the spring around in your hand. Just make sure, and you are going to probably want to wash your hands after doing this, I would expect, or not touch your furniture or valuable things. And it's normally good, I said this actually in the gas blowback pistol video as well, but having like a workspace like this, like I'm lucky this is, you know, in my office, and I've kind of got this, which is like a, almost like a mouse pad, you know, like for your desk where you can put your laptop, your keyboard on here and your mouse. And then I've got this cutting board, and these cutting boards are great. I kind of, if I'm doing anything tech related, like whether it's, you know, using a punch or a pin or a knife or anything, this thing isn't really gonna, it's gonna take a lot of that abuse, and it's not gonna allow me to like damage the desk. So I really like these, and I'll use them. I know you can get kind of like Airsoft versions of them, I think, where it's kind of like the breakdown of like this gas blowback, where you can see the internals, almost like a little instruction manual like laid out on the thing. And those are pretty cool. But generally you can get these from like anywhere. You can order them from Amazon. I'll try and put a link down below to that as well. But that's going to be this. I am trying to do it a bit quickly, guys. So if you're looking at me like, hey, you haven't cleaned that properly, you haven't done that, I am trying to not make this video too long and boring for you guys. So I'm probably going a bit quicker. So this is something that I have lubed a lot, because this is kind of your main part of your gas blowback that's going to be pushing that air through into the barrel. And you know, this thing needs to be lubed properly. It needs to be clean. It needs to be working properly. You can change the bolt out if you get a damaged one. You know, you can buy so many like aftermarket bolts now for the Tokyo Marui system for sure, but also other systems. This is going to be very similar, guys, as well for your VFCs, your GHKs. You know, they may come apart slightly differently, or certain parts are going to look a little bit different. But in general, this is like the basics of, I have a gas blowback, I need to clean it. You know, you're going to be taking the bolt, the spring, the buffer tube, all of this type of stuff. I will also I'll do a video on cleaning the magazines. I've done a video actually in the past of just like replacing the O-rings in a pistol mag. But the magazines, like, I think a lot of people overlook them. Like, that is, again, like the bolt I've just said is a very key part. But the magazine really is like one of the most important things. It's like that's where your BB is being fed from. It's where your gas is coming from. And so you really need that to be like really looked after. You need to make sure all your mags are working before you're actually like using them, and testing them at home before you go out and play, because they are really going to be a big part of like your consistency, your gameplay. If the valve's being hit and it's letting too much gas out, or it's leaking, or so there's little bits here, like this little roller here. I'm just making sure that that is kind of like wiped and taken care of. I'm going to do it again now with the Q-tip just to get into like the little cracks. But generally this actually doesn't feel too bad. The other thing you can do while this is out is like check the wear marks. So you can see that's where it's rubbing, which is good. I don't have any scratches or dents. I've just kind of got that silver where it's just moving. You can see if there are any cracks in the actual bolt. You can see if there's any like cracks or nicks in the air nozzle, which is again going to be a big part. I'm going to quickly I'm going to clean around the air nozzle, but I'm going to first just do the outside of this bolt, and then I'll move to that air nozzle after. You also want to check, you know, are the springs working? Are things rotating nicely? Like this bolt's working well. The actual like pins aren't walking themselves out like it did on that buffer. And this bolt actually, compared to that buffer, is a lot cleaner than I was thinking it would be. I think because I played with that XM5 on Sunday, that one's going to be a lot dirtier. And it was very hot and very dusty in Southern California on Sunday. So that's going to be the big one. Okay, so generally, yeah, I think this is looking pretty good. Let me just get another one of those. But each time I'm going through this with this Q-tip or with the swab, it's just getting less and less dirty. There's less and less like grease on it. Make sure all these rollers, sorry, these like surfaces that are rubbing on the metal, you know, they may have some like dirt that's kind of more baked in. But I'd say this is probably the most important bit to keep clean. Even if you're not going to take the replica apart fully and do everything, just make sure your bolt's nice and clean before you go out and play. Because that is another thing, is like this air seal here from this little nozzle, that's going to be one of the most important things. So you just need to make sure that that is in a good state and it's not going to be giving an air leak where it's going to, you know, affect your FPS or your consistency. Okay, so now I'm just pulling this actual air nozzle out, and there is a spring inside. So I want to make sure that that is, look at that already, you can see the dirt there. I want to make sure that that spring is working and it's allowing this to snap back very easily. There's a bit of lint came off there, which is great. Just make sure that that's working nicely. It's not sticking. And this is important to have like the outside of this lubed. You definitely do not want the end of it or the inside having lubricant in it, because what is going to happen then is that is going to spray internally all over your hop rubber, up your inner barrel, and that is going to affect performance and consistency for sure, because obviously if there's no friction on that hop rubber, then you are not going to have the same backspin and the same distance that the BB is going to travel. Yeah, this is a lot dirtier than I thought it would be. This is kind of embarrassing a little bit. Okay, I'm going to get another one of these. All these little grooves and edges. You can get ones of these, I think I said, which are more pointed. You don't necessarily have to have this round end. You can get ones which definitely have more of like an angled tip to them, which can be a lot better for getting into these tight spaces, which I would recommend. And you can get actually, I'm going to take a clean one and put it into this air nozzle end gently, because I don't really want to put more dirt in there than I need to, and that's relatively clean, which is good. Again, there's going to be different variants of this bolt. You might have like one which has a spring within the actual like air nozzle seal here. Again, just be very gentle and just make sure everything is wiped. With the cleaning off, you can kind of just wipe everything. With the lubrication afterwards, you definitely can't necessarily do that, so don't feel like this bit's pretty easy, just as long as you're gentle. The other bit, you just need to be a bit more careful. So that bolt's looking pretty good. That's nice and clean. Now, last bits we're going to do is going to be this upper. So it's going to be harder. In fact, it's not going to be too hard. I'm just going to put this inside the chamber here and rub along, and you can see we're getting dirt here. There is going to be where the charging handle sits down below, and that's going to be, my finger's not going to fit in there. So I need to try and get a Q-tip down into that space. But all of this area here needs to be wiped down. I'm going to have around the dust cover. And lubricant will kind of like get onto these areas just from where your bolt's moving back and forward, and just kind of starts to spread it. So that's again where grease and dirt is going to stick around. And yeah, this runner here where the actual charging handle is, this has definitely got quite a bit of dirt in here. Okay, and then I'm going to go around where the hop ring is for the hop adjustment. I don't really want to adjust the hop, or I don't want to change the adjustment of it, just because I don't really want to have to like retune this and be like, okay, I want to adjust the hop right now. I could do that very easily, and you do want to remove that inner barrel, the hop rubber, everything like that, and make sure that's all clean. But as I said, in this one, this is kind of like your regular maintenance, not your kind of deep clean video. And I will do one of those if you want. So I'm going to go around the inside just there of where the hop unit is, but I'm not going to actually put this dirty swab onto the hop rubber. I'm going to do that with I'm going to go past it with a fresh swab. So for right now, I am just basically around it, trying to pick up as much of this dirt as I can. Not drag dirt and like affect the surface of the hop rubber at all. But this cylinder where it's going into it, I want to make sure that's all nice and clean. This is often where, if I've had shattered BBs, it's where this air nozzle has kind of taken it into the chamber here, and it's kind of like slammed it against this. So you may find some little fragments of BBs there if you've had that happen, and you just don't want those in there. I find actually a good way to do it with the trigger box, if you're not going to take the trigger box out and clean it, is actually to get one of those air blowers, and you could just kind of like blow the high pressure little air blower things into that space, and it will generally kind of clear out any of the issues. I mean, I've had it before where I was using an HPA, this specific replica actually, and it's obviously double fed, or it's like cracked one of the BBs, and then suddenly my triggers just stopped working, or it's not like allowing me to depress the trigger enough to shoot. And I've been like, what is going on here? And it ended up that you have a little bit of BB that just gets stuck in that area and stops the actual trigger functioning. So there's not much you can do in the field there. You can take it apart, But if you're in the middle of a game and it's dirty, you don't maybe want to do that. Okay, so that's all good. Now what we can do as well, you know, I'm not going to do this too much, but we want to go around the outside of here, wipe this flash hider. We want to wipe the rail. We want to make sure, you know, all of this is looking nice, just to make it look more aesthetically pleasing more than anything. You know, you're not going to have issues where this is getting hot and is burning up anything because it's an airsoft replica. It's not real steel. But we're going to do that. We're also now, for the final part of the cleaning section, going to clean out the inner barrel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to try not to touch the hot rubber too much, but I'm going to basically pass this through. And really what you should have, and I have somewhere, but I can't be bothered to find it, is a barrel cleaning rod, like one of the rods, and you get them sometimes with some of these replicas where they'll give you that little rod and you can put one of these little swabs on the end of it and you can just kind of pass it down through the barrel. I would say I tend to go in from two ends. I go in from this end and I go past the hot rubber without rubbing on the hot rubber. And then I'll do the opposite where I'll come in from this end at the top and I will rub the barrel and make sure it doesn't go too low. So it doesn't go into the point where it's touching that hot rubber similarly. So I'm always trying to clean all of the inner surfaces without touching that hot rubber. And I think probably you could touch the hot rubber and you wouldn't do a huge amount of damage to it, but I just don't want to risk it. And if I've got any dirt already on this, I don't want to just rub it all over the hot rubber. And this barrel actually is relatively clean. It's not too bad. And I'm not going probably deep enough. I'm probably coming to here and then my other one's coming to here. So there will be a gap here. And so if I had more time and I could go and get this stuff for you, I would just get a longer rod, longer one of these, or we would get a version of this, which was that long rod and just have that swab in there. You could use a real steel one, but I think the inner barrel diameter of this being like 6.0 watt millimeters is going to be too tight and you don't want to scratch that inner barrel. When you've got a real steel one, you know, like it's made of a lot more sturdy material and it's got like a bore or a spiral cut into the actual location on it, onto the actual surface of the inner barrel, or just barrel really. So you don't have to worry quite as much. Whereas with this, I would just be a bit more careful. Okay guys, so that's going to be the cleaning part of it. Now what I'm going to do is get the lubrication going. So we'll try and put this off to one side a little bit. I'll put these away in the bin. And then I'm going to get out, first of all, this guy, which is going to be my silicone. And I am going to effectively just lubricate all of the little bits that I just think metal is going to touch metal. Now that's the big thing, is wherever metal is going to touch metal, that's where you're going to get rubbing and that's where you need it. So I'm going to put very little in here. I think a lot of people put too much. So I'm just putting little drops along this area where the charging handle is going to go along, and it's going to spread. So you can see there, I've just put a few little drops along there, and the charging handle, when it's in there, is actually just going to basically do the work for me and spread it along. I'm going to put a couple just on the inner chamber. I'm going to put one just quickly on the spring of the dust cover. And you will get some movement in the, like some of this will come out. I didn't really clean this, but I'm going to put some on the forward assist. And the other thing I can do is I can kind of take one of these swabs and just rub it around. If I've put too much on it, then that's a good way to kind of just like pick up some excess and not have it kind of go too far. Then next I'm going to do, I'm going to probably actually just put this charging handle right in here and then just make sure that that is sitting in there nicely. Just make sure that's all good. And I'll make sure that there's a little bit on here. on the end here, so that's rubbing on that side, a little bit there. But again, as I said, we don't want too much in here. And that really, for the upper, is all we need to do. Again, avoid that hop unit, avoid the hop rubber. We definitely don't want anything in there. Next, I'm going to put a little bit of lube into the trigger box. Again, we don't want too much in here. I don't want it to affect this, so I'm just going to put a tiny bit on this rotating little wheel here. I'm going to put a little bit just into the crevice here, but very, very little is what we're going to do. I'm going to put a tiny bit on the pin, but again, we don't want to do that because you don't want the pin to like unseat itself. And then also I don't really want any on the end of where the Z plate is, because that's going to hold into the bolt, and basically we don't want that slipping off. I'm going to put a tiny bit in the back of the buffer tube and just on this like holding point, which is going to be holding that in just because it's got a spring in there as well. And then I am going to actually get some of this PTFE, and I'm just going to put a tiny bit onto the spring here. I'm just going to put this along. Again, you don't need this necessarily. You could just do it with lube, but I've heard, let it drop it on myself, I've heard that this will just keep for longer, and it's less like slidey. You know, it's actually going to kind of do a better job of staying in place, probably lubing without just having the parts slide across each other. So I'm going to put this guy into this rear section here, into the buffer tube. I'll put that in, and I'll just have that hold there for a second. I'm then going to do the same with this, and I'm just going to put some lubricant here. I'll spread it around with one of these guys here. Just make sure it's not stuck in any specific spot. Put a bit more here. You can just leave it on there because again, it's going to kind of like move. Where this is moving backwards and forwards, I'm just going to make sure we got a little bit there. And we should be pretty good with that. This is just going to slide into the spring, and then we're going to put that straight back in, have that lock in place, and then that is in there, nicely lubricated, so it should just go back and forward and slide nicely. I'm going to put maybe a little bit of lube just in terms of like, okay, there's a spring in the mag release, and there is a spring in the bolt release. Tiny, tiny drops. And then what we're going to do is get the bolt, which is here. And I'm going to similarly, on the kind of areas where it's going to be rubbing, and you can normally tell that with these little gray areas where you can see the wear's been. I'm going to kind of put some of this PTFE, what is it? Sorry, silicone lubricating grease along there. I'll put some on there. I'm going to avoid this air nozzle, like the end of it. I don't really want any touching the actual end of where that nozzle's going to go in. But what I am going to do is I'm going to pull this nozzle out, and I'm going to drop a couple of drops just at the rear here. Sorry. Just at the rear and just along these lines where that's going to just kind of like rub in and out. So I don't want to get any in where air's going to be. But I do want to make sure that it's going to move backwards and forwards nicely. So now if I pull this, you can see there, it's got a nice movement. That lubricant's going along, and that's going to spread around without getting into like the air system. So then what we can do is we'll pull this charging handle out a bit. We'll seat the bolt into the chamber. We'll push that forward and lock it in. Probably just wipe my hands down to make sure that we're not kind of putting stuff places that we don't want it to go. And make sure you put that bolt in before you close the actual upper and lower, because what will happen is you will release this bolt, sorry, the buffer and the spring, and that will shoot into the chamber. And therefore you're then having to like push the spring back, and you can't open and close it because the spring is locked in. I'm not going to show you what that looks like because that would not be fun for me to do it, but trust me, I have done it a couple of times, and if you do it, it's not the end of the world. Just try to go slow and not do too much in the way of like bending the spring, because you don't want to do that. Okay, so we're looking pretty good now. You can hear here, like that system now is just very smooth. My trigger's working. My actual safe is there. It's good. Semi is good. Like the fire selector's fine. My bolt release, yeah, that's all good. And there does not seem to be too much going out. Now, what I will also sometimes do, and I'll do this just generally before I play sometimes, is put a tiny little dab of this just on the bolt, on the outside where the dust cover is. And then by doing this, I'll just give it a little rub in, and that will just keep that area nice and good. So there we go, guys. That is your gas blowback rifle, more your AR kind of base platform. Nicely lubed, or cleaned and lubed, and good to go. So if you do that regularly, you may want to do a quicker job, a longer job, just depending on how much time you have and what you're doing. And then go out and test it. Go put a mag of BBs in there, fire it, make sure it's not being affected by any of that stuff. If there is grease in there, you can go back in, get the swabs out, clean the grease out, just make sure there's nothing in the working parts that you don't want to be there. But that should kind of be the basics of it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this has been interesting for you and hasn't taken too long. I think we've actually been going for far too long here, 45 minutes. So hopefully it's not been too boring. But if you have any questions, as always, put them in the comments below. If you have any tips or tricks for me to get better at this, or something I've missed, which definitely I could have done as I was doing this, but I think we're pretty good. Put those in the comments below. And guys, thank you so much for being here, and have a great day wherever you are. I will see you all very soon. Goodbye.